breakfast. It's Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk with Matthew Dixon.
Yes. I fly a lot. Do you like flying?
I do like flying,
I
yeah.
love
It's
flying.
so convenient.
I love the little peanuts in the little tiny packets that you can't undo. I love the plastic cups or glasses that they bring you soft drink in.
I just love
And the tiny little handles on the cups of coffee that you can't put your finger through.
Yeah.
And I love it when you put it on the tray and the plane shakes and it spills everywhere. That is flying.
Yeah, well, that's all part of it. I just love the science behind flying. I just love the
There's
fact
no
that...
science.
Well, hopefully there is. Hopefully there's something
There's
keeping it up
money.
there. There's a lot of money
And
behind
thank
flying.
God for first class passengers so I can get a cheapie out the back.
Yeah, true.
It's true, isn't it? But that shaking of the plane could be caused because there's an autopilot flying a thing.
Yeah.
Autonomous plane.
Yeah, and
Now, we're not talking about the autopilot, though, are we?
No, we're comfortable with that.
Isn't an autopilot doesn't that make the plane autonomous?
Not quite. The autopilot basically keeps it flying along, but the humans are sitting there keeping a bit of an eye on things.
No, they're asleep.
They're asleep until the alarm goes off in the cockpit. Then, oh, what's going on here?
Yeah.
But it's interesting. The first autopilot was actually invented in 1912.
Yeah.
So not long after the Wright brothers first got up in the air, there's suddenly an autopilot. So we've all gotten comfortable. We don't know what's going on in the cockpit, really, Richard. When
We don't want to know.
when we're sitting back there, we just go, I assume there's a pilot up there. But as you say, they might be having a sleep. They might be having a party for all we know. But the next step, and this is the one that gets a bit scary, we've gone from 5 pilots back in the 70s and 60s.
Navigators, the whole thing.
Yeah, there used to be all these people in the cockpit. Now we've got 2 pilots sitting there in the cockpit, and we go, oh, that's all right, and the autopilot's flying. Are we going to be comfortable when we get to 0 pilots in the cockpit? So now we're talking autonomous flying.
I don't know, Matty. I don't know.
It's a bit scary, isn't it? Now, I've seen enough air crash investigations, Richard, to know
That's
that
my
the
favourite show.
the autopilot is great until it's not.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that sometimes happens, is that the autopilot will sometimes take control and do the wrong thing.
No,
Max,
it's not doing the wrong thing. It's been programmed by aliens to do that.
correct, but the 737 MAX
Yeah.
is a perfect example.
Yes.
There's been 2 crashes that have been a result of autopilot, but there's a company in America at the moment that's converting an entire fleet of King Air planes, and we're familiar with the King Air because the Royal Flying Doctor Service uses about 40 of those,
Yep.
and they're converting a whole fleet of 55 of these King Airs to be totally autonomous. They'll be sitting on the ground, they'll be told to go and take off, do a certain route, and then come back and land, and there won't be a human on board. There won't be a cockpit a human on board. There might be other humans on board, but
Patients and nurses.
well, there might be other things. So at the moment, they're getting FAA approval for things like fire surveillance. So a bushfire, they can take off, fly above the bushfire, see where it's going, then come back and land. For things like monitoring, when they're going out and doing some monitoring, some agricultural purposes, for example, it'll get to the stage before long where freight will be on board. And then, I'm saying it's probably 10 years away, but then it'll get to the stage where you and I are going off for our weekend down to Vegas, so we get on the plane in LA and it takes off and lands, and maybe the biggest gamble is not what happens in the casino, but flying from A to B.
But outside of Vegas, as you know, there's a ring of mountains.
Yeah, true.
Now, what happens? Does the autopilot or the autonomous plane know how to navigate different topography like that?
That would all be programmed into it, and again, it relies on sensors so much, and there's a lot of work being done now with a number of companies on LiDAR, which is basically looking at the imaging, not through cameras, but through radar as such. So it knows when it's flying, oh, there's a mountain coming up, oh, I'm getting close to it, I better go up higher.
Well, indeed, if a plane's going too low, it does tell the pilot.
You've got,
Too
again,
low.
we both watched air crash investigations. We've heard those noises going off and it's getting too close to the ground. But that will all be part of it. But more importantly, it would have a route programmed into it. So it would go, I'm going to go from
Flight
LA,
path.
a flight path. Yeah, I'm going to go from LA across to Vegas. Oh, I know there's some mountains there. I've got to be above 5,000 feet when I come in there, etc., etc. But again, we're relying totally on a computer and someone who's programmed the computer.
And we're also relying on the topography, which is there, and has probably been there for Zions.
Correct.
What happens if a flock of birds comes across the front of the plane?
And these are the things. So that's where a pilot sitting there having a cup of tea, relaxing, and suddenly there's a bird strike, like we saw with the Hudson River example. There's a bird strike, and oh no, I've got to do something. And that's where we all feel a bit more comfortable that a pilot's there, not just to do the normal, oh, I'll get up in the air and sit at 36,000 feet and fly along. Hold on, something's gone wrong. Now I want a human involved. Thank you very much.
So will there be a human in these autonomous planes?
There'll be no human flying it. There will be some monitoring done remotely, but that one human monitoring things isn't flying. It's not like a remote control plane. They're not flying that plane, but they're monitoring. So they might be monitoring 10 planes, 20 planes, who knows how many. And then, oh, there's a bird strike on plane number 17. I've got to now go and take some action and help the computer out to get around it. But there is a checklist. When something happens on a plane, the pilot pulls out the checklist.
Yeah,
okay,
that's right.
left engine gone. What's the checklist? Oh, I go and do this and this and this. Pray. Tell the passengers to make their peace. So you've got all these processes that are programmed there.
So in the future, how long? Autonomous planes?
Within a year, they'll be flying and doing standard routes without passengers on board. My guess is 10 years with passengers on board.
I'm going to learn to fly myself.
Yeah, good idea.
Goodness me, autonomous planes. I don't mind air crash investigations. They're good, aren't they?
It is, good show.
I love that. It's my favourite show.
Breakfast is Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk with Matthew Dixon.